Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Judy Hopkinson, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham, Whatcom County. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So before we get started, please take a moment to be sure your cell phones are turned off. Thank you. These voter forums are presented by the League of Women Voters of Bellingham, Whatcom County, and the City of Bellingham. The city has provided the facilities, and the forum is being telecast live by BTV 10. Forums will be repeated on BTV 10, the city's YouTube channel, and on low-powered radio stations KMRE and KAVZ. And the Bellingham Herald is our media partner. We thank all of our partners for their generous support, and if you have the opportunity, we hope you'll thank them as well. Founded in 1920, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization with 800 affiliates across the country. It encourages informed and active participation in government. It works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to men and women 16 years of age and older, and we invite you all to join. This morning is the third of 3 forums produced this fall by our league, and we will be covering 3 of the statewide initiatives that will appear on your ballot. That's Initiative 732, the carbon consumption tax, Initiative 1433, Raise Up Washington, and Initiative 1464, government accountability. You will hear a better description of those initiatives in a few moments. So this is your opportunity to hear directly from representatives chosen by groups promoting and opposing these initiatives. While many organizations, including the State League of Women Voters, have taken positions on some initiatives, this forum is neutral territory, where you, the voter, can listen to the arguments directly and make your own informed choice. We ask your assistance in maintaining the level of decorum and respect that for all viewpoints that make democracy a workable form of government. These forums are the property of the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County and the City of Bellingham, and may not be used in any manner without specific written permission from both parties. Now, because we could not get all of the statewide initiatives into the program today, we have prepared a handout for you which describes all of the initiatives with pro and con statements. Please feel free to pick one up as you leave if you would like. Now I would like to introduce our moderator, league member, Rebecca Johnson. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Judy's co-president of the League, and as Judy has shared, we're going to be covering 3 ballot measures this morning. But before we begin, the rules of the forum are: each ballot measure will have a pro and a con speaker. The speakers will have 1 minute each for an opening statement, and each speaker will have 1 minute to respond to each question, and each will make a 1-minute closing statement. For each ballot measure, the pro speaker will go first with both the opening and the closing statements. We will switch up which speaker responds first to the questions as we go through the question and answer forum. And in addition to the questions, each speaker has a challenge card. You want to hold up your challenge cards. So speakers can use this card to challenge or rebut the other speaker's response. The challenging speaker will have 45 seconds to state their challenge, and his or her opponent will have 45 seconds to respond to the challenge. Each speaker can use their challenge card 3 times during the question and answer periods. You just simply hold up your card and to let us know. We have timers. Riley Abel and Carol Como, here they are right in the front, and they'll be tracking the time. Carol will flash the yellow sign when there's 15 seconds remaining and a red sign to signal that the time's up. If a candidate continues, a bell will be rung to signal stop talking. And we ask that the candidates be respectful of the time allotted due to the limited time that we have and our desire to include as many questions as possible. To the audience, directions for you. An important goal of the league is civil discussion. To that end, we ask that those in the audience be respectful and refrain from comments, as well as hold their applause until the conclusion of each segment of the forum. We encourage you to provide written questions for the speakers. Questions should be addressed to both the pro and con speaker. Ushers are available throughout the chambers. Can we see the ushers? Who will come and get these white index cards from you and bring them up to our screeners. Questions will be screened by league members Joe Collins, Amy Cloud, and Jean Carmine, and they will be screening for legibility, clarity, and to avoid duplication. After introducing our speakers for each ballot measure, I'm going to read the initiative as it appears on the ballot and then give a brief summary statement that was prepared by the League of Women Voters of Washington. So here we go. Our first measure is Initiative 732, the carbon tax. This measure would impose a carbon emission tax on certain fossil fuels and fossil fuel generated electricity, reduce the sales tax by 1 percentage point, and increase a low-income exemption and reduce certain manufacturing taxes. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? So in summary, this measure would impose a carbon emission tax on the sale or use of fossil fuels, including gasoline and fossil fuel generated electricity, at $25 per metric ton of carbon dioxide in 2017, increasing gradually to $100 per metric ton. This tax would be phased in more gradually for some users. It would reduce the sales tax rate by 1% over 2 years, increase a low-income tax exemption to as much as $1,500, and reduce some manufacturing taxes to promote energy sources other than fossil fuels. So timers, are you ready? All right, we're going to begin with our opening statement. No, I'm going to introduce my speakers. Yes, I am. Our speaker representing a yes vote on Initiative 732 is Rhiannon Johnston. She's the Northwest Washington coordinator for the Initiative 732 campaign, and our speaker representing the no vote is Edgar Franks, the civic engagement coordinator at Community to Community Development, a Bellingham-based organization that works toward a just food system and a new economy. Speakers, timers, are you ready? Speakers, you're ready. You've been introduced. Ms. Johnson, you're the pro. Would you please go ahead and give us your 1-minute opening statement?
Good morning, and thank you for having us and all being here. Initiative 732 proposes a first step to fighting climate change based on a simple idea: tax pollution, not people. Essentially, a tax would be levied on the primary producers of carbon pollution, while any cost passed down to consumers is offset through a 1-point reduction in the state sales tax, the elimination of the business and occupation tax, and by funding a tax rebate for low-income families. Washington State currently has the most regressive tax system in the country. Reducing the sales tax by a full percentage point significantly improves our state tax code, while funding the working families rebate gives back money to 460,000 low-income families. Combined, this would be the most progressive change to our tax code in over 40 years. Furthermore, cutting the B&O tax helps ensure that energy-intensive manufacturers stay competitive and in Washington State, while they transition to more sustainable practices. I-732's price on carbon increases each year to keep up with inflation, maintain revenue neutrality, and provide continued incentive to reduce.
All right, Mr. Franks, please give your opening statement.
So good morning, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for inviting us here. Buenos días, mi nombre es Edgar, soy de Comunidad a Comunidad. So I wanted to say that first because I wanted to introduce myself in my first language, in Spanish, and for all the people that don't understand English or English is their second language. I wanted to make sure that this process was as inclusive as possible. So for us, we say that we can do better than the carbon tax that is being proposed. Right now, we agree that climate change is one of the biggest issues that affects us all. It's one of the issues that we could all unify around while we work to solve the problems of climate change. We also are right now in the unique position of also looking into new solutions of how we can come up with a new economy, a new plan that tackles poverty and at the same time addresses climate change. So we feel that even though we do agree that climate change is
Thank you. Okay, here's going to be our first question, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Franks.
Okay.
Initiative 732 is presented as a tax measure with a carbon reduction tax funding reductions in the sales tax and in the business and occupation tax. Is tax reform its primary purpose, or is carbon reduction?
Well, I know that the initiative is based off of a model that's in Vancouver or in British Columbia. Initially, I think the set was to put a tax on carbon and that tax to be used to fund other programs. However, the aim was to minimize emissions. I think the goal right now is to minimize emissions and at the same time the goal for Washington would be to minimize emissions, but I think if we base it off the market strategy that Carbon Law is proposing, I don't think it's going to bring the emissions to the standards that we need them here in Washington State, and at the same time blow a hole in our budget. I think right now it's estimated that it's going to cost the state over $700 million within the first 5 years. So, and I think that is not a position that we can't be in.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston, do you want me to repeat the question, or?
No, it's fine.
Okay, thanks.
So this measure is primarily aimed at reducing emissions. To be clear, this would be the strongest price on carbon that in all of North America. It's stronger than the price in British Columbia that Edgar mentioned. Furthermore, we would meet our reductions goals under the Clean Power Plan that Obama has proposed, as well as Jay Inslee's Clean Air Rule. We expect about a 2.4% reduction in emissions annually. Inslee's Clean Air Rule, in comparison, only mandates a 1.7% reduction. So this would be a very effective price on carbon. British Columbia had an effective price as well, but they capped it at a certain point. The continually rising price in this case keeps going up, and but in exchange, we're using these other tax reform measures to offset that cost to families and Washingtonians.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Johnson, we're going to go back to you now. Some of those opposing this initiative share the goal of reducing carbon dioxide emissions in the state. Do you believe this proposal will accomplish that goal? And please present evidence to support your opinion.
Yes, I do believe that this initiative will help us reduce emissions. As I just mentioned, I guess a little prematurely, but this is a very effective price. This would be the strongest. It starts out at $15 per ton in the first year and then goes up to $25 a ton. And after that, continues to increase annually to keep up with inflation, maintain revenue neutrality, and continue to provide that incentive for people to be reducing. Like I said, we meet, if not exceed, our reductions under the Clean Power Plan and the Clean Air Rule, and that puts us so on track. And we're doing it in a manner that's bipartisan because we're not increasing the overall taxes in the state. And so it's a model that we can use in the rest of the country to spread to other states that are not quite as blue as Washington State.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat that?
Yes.
Okay. So some of those opposing this initiative share the goal of reducing carbon dioxide emissions in the state. Do you believe this proposal will accomplish that goal? Please present evidence to support your opinion.
Okay. No, I don't think it'll meet the emission standards. I was able to go to Paris for the COP21 conference, and what was being proposed that globally the temperatures can't rise over 2 degrees Celsius. We see that in the text, we're basing it a lot of our information from what's coming out of BC. The emissions reductions haven't met the first proposed, or the what was first thought of. So I think that they're supposed to be limiting emissions by 10% by this time, since it's almost been 10 years since first implemented. I think at the first couple of years it was meeting those standards, but now emissions have actually tabled off, and they're not meeting the emissions limits that they were first being proposed to do. So we don't think that this does enough to limit the emissions and mitigate climate change.
All right, we have a challenge question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add, British Columbia, part of the reason that their emissions have leveled off is they capped their price in 2013 at $30 per ton. So they have stopped continuing to increase the price, which has reduced the incentive to be reducing. Furthermore, I think the latest science, as Edgar says, we have 5 years until we reach 1.5 degrees increase. 2 degrees, like Edgar mentioned, is what we're trying to prevent reaching, and I don't think that we have enough time to keep waiting, and this is a very effective first step for us to reduce emissions effectively.
So Edgar, you actually get to respond without using your card here.
Oh,
thank you.
Good. So, and again, I think, we do feel the urgency of climate change. We do feel that something needs to be done, but doing something that's wrong could actually be more detrimental in the long run if we don't get it right the first time. If carbon tax, I think for us, we've been saying that a carbon tax is a start, but it doesn't go far enough. We know it would pretty much torpedo a lot of the real solutions that we need for mitigating and addressing climate change. So for us, again, the carbon tax is not the solution that we should be looking for. If we're going to get this thing, we have to get it right the first time.
Okay, thank you. All right, our third question goes to Mr. Franks. In mid-September, the State Department of Ecology announced limits on carbon emissions beginning next year. Utility companies, including Cascade Natural Gas and Puget Sound Energy, sued in federal court to invalidate the action. How does this impact I-732?
Well, again, I think the light of the issues that are going to come out is that a lot of the costs are going to go down and affect the consumers. Where a lot of the communities that we represent are the low income, the poor people, the working poor people, from farm workers to working class white folks. So for us, we can't be in the position where companies get to raise the prices on energy while still not looking for solutions to make energy cheaper. What we always keep proposing is that we need to incentivize innovation. If we need to move to solar, to hydro, to wind, to those kinds of other things that we need to look at, they need to be funded. Companies need to be looking for ways to incentivize that way, and the public projects need to be funded. And I don't think a carbon tax does that to make sure that we don't transition into that.
Thank you. Would you want me to repeat that? Okay. So in mid-September, the State Department of Ecology announced limits on carbon emissions beginning next year. The utility companies, including Cascade Natural Gas and Puget Sound Energy, sued in federal court to invalidate the action. How does this impact I-732?
It doesn't really. I-732 is separate from that. While it can function as the mechanism under the Clean Air Rule that would allow us to reach those 1.7% reductions, it is separate from that, and as such, any lawsuits against the Clean Air Rule would not impact I-732 if it passes. The mechanism that is more supported by some of these big companies, because we offset their increased energy costs through the B&O tax cut, and then as well, we're offsetting those costs for regular consumers and low-income families through the sales tax reduction, as well as funding the working families rebate, which reaches almost half of everyone in poverty in Washington state. So those are two big things that make I-732, I think, more effective than the Clean Air Rule alone.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Ms. Johnston. In their suit, the utility companies contend that reducing greenhouse gases should be addressed, but on a national level. What's your view of this position?
That's actually the primary goal behind the revenue neutral aspect of this policy. We recognize that there are many states that are much less progressive than Washington state, and that we need more global, more national climate action. So by passing a bipartisan supported policy in Washington state, we set an example for the rest of the country that we don't have to make climate change a partisan issue. It can be something that people, regardless of political views, can support. By not increasing taxes and not increasing the size of government, but still putting an effective price on greenhouse gas emissions, we make it possible for people to respect and support this policy regardless of their views politically. That's a huge aspect of this, and the main goal, we can make it something that folks across the country can support, and other folks can also implement this carbon tax, giving us national action.
Thank you. So, Mr. Franks, what is your view on the fact that the utility companies contend that reducing greenhouse gases should be addressed on a national level?
Well, I think that it should be twofold. States and the nation should be putting forward their positions on how to address climate change. For us, it's important to be partisan, but at the same time, or bipartisan, but at the same time, we also need to be more inclusive of other voices in the room to make policies. We feel that a lot of the communities that are the most affected by climate change, we're here, we would have refineries and stuff like that would be affected. A lot of people would be losing their work. We don't think that the carbon law proposition would help transition from, if they're talking about ending fossil fuels, we don't think that it would do enough to help the affected workers to transition into new jobs. So that's why we always say that we want, if we want to do this, we need to involve those workers that are going to be affected by losing their jobs and to be part of this solution that we're looking for to be more inclusive. So we do need to tackle it at the national level and at the local level.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Franks, can you give a specific example of how this initiative affects those at the poverty level?
Okay, yeah, so again, I just mentioned it a little bit. First, I think the process of bringing about this initiative excluded a lot of folks that are already feeling the impacts of climate and environmental injustices. If there's an example that we've clearly known that about the asthma rates in South Park, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Seattle, how their children have higher asthma rates than folks living in more affluent neighborhoods in Seattle. So we feel that through this process, those folks are, if we're going to do this right, the folks that are being affected, right, are going to be needed at the table to see what is a true initiative that represents them and is a true solution. We don't think that the $100, or we did the calculator thing on the website, I think $100 was like what most folks would be getting in the rebate, and I don't think that addresses the issue of poverty, of systemic poverty. If we're going to take on climate change, we could also take on poverty at the same time.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Johnson, can you give a specific example of how this initiative affects those at the poverty level?
Yeah, so Edgar is right. Climate change does impact low-income communities more, as does a carbon tax, because it's inherently regressive. So the idea behind 732 is that we offset that by also reducing the state sales tax, so that for most people, they break even. For people in the lowest 20% income bracket, funding the working families rebate, which admittedly doesn't unfortunately reach everyone in Washington, but it does reach 460,000 low-income families, and those families would get up to $1,500 back per year in their rebates. Furthermore, I personally think that the longer we wait, and if we wait 4 more years to put another initiative on the ballot, that the longer we wait, the worse the climate change will be, the worse those impacts will be, and the worse everyone will be impacted, including those low-income communities.
Right, thank you. And now we're back to you, Ms. Johnson. How would adoption of this initiative impact development of a clean energy industry in our state?
Yeah, so most economists agree that a tax on carbon, putting a price, internalizing the cost of the pollution from burning fossil fuels is the most effective way and most direct way to incentivize clean energy. It's pretty simple. By making dirty energy more expensive, we make clean energy more competitive. So now there's an incentive for folks, whether it's the utilities, depending on where they buy their electricity, down to people choosing between buying a Leaf or buying a less fuel-efficient car. So a carbon tax is a very simple, direct way to take advantage of market mechanisms and get people to think about how they can save energy and be more fuel efficient, and that's a really easy way to make clean energy so much more competitive.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to repeat that?
Yes.
Okay. So how would adoption of this initiative impact development of a clean energy industry in our state?
I think, like how I mentioned it before, I think it would actually be almost a barrier to transition into the new economy and the new energy system that we want to see, because it doesn't provide the framework, the right framework to move to solar, because polluters can just keep paying for pollution. It doesn't, if polluters can just pay, they'll never switch over to they keep emitting and emitting, and they'll just be paying and paying. There is nothing that stops them from moving on to solar, to wind, to the more sustainable energy forms that we need. So I think it does affect our energy and how we address it. So for us, again, we talk a lot about the just transition model, about where it's more inclusive, and it's also at the same time we can address climate change and mitigate it, and also incentivize new forms of tackling it on, whether it be transportation and other things.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Franks, looking at the tax provisions of this measure, would adoption of I-732 make our tax system fairer to both consumers and businesses? Please explain your answer.
I don't think that the tax, the carbon tax would make it fair. Like I said, I think a lot of the tax cuts would go into big corporations. I think Boeing would get another tax break, compounding the one that they just had last year. A lot of the negative effects would be felt to the small businesses. And again, I think the taxes, again, would be again benefiting the corporations and not being seen. The regular folks wouldn't be seeing the benefits of the tax. And again, like I just said, the $100 or the rebates for the working families is not enough. So for us, lots of the benefits would be actually hurtful to the just regular working people.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to read it? Just, so looking at the tax provisions of this measure, would adoption of I-732 make our tax system fairer to both consumers and businesses? And if you'd explain your answer.
Yeah. So a carbon tax is inherently regressive. It will impact lower incomes more than people that have more options. A sales tax, which Washington State also has, is also incredibly regressive. We have the most regressive tax code in the whole country, which is frankly crazy. So what we do is, or what 732 does, is it offsets increasing the regressivity of our tax system by adding a carbon tax, by also cutting the sales tax. So those two sort of cancel each other out. But then by also adding the working families rebate, we are making a hugely progressive change to our tax code since 40 years or so. And that is a huge benefit. Because this is revenue neutral, we maintain the revenue, or the structure of our tax code and make it fairer than it would if it were a revenue positive proposal.
All right, and we have a challenge here for Mr.
So
Franks.
again, I wanted to take on this thing about being revenue neutral. And again, the state has released a lot of the studies from this, from the proposed tax, where it says that it's going to cost the taxpayers $700 million within the first 5 years of being implemented. And I don't think those are cuts that we can afford right now, especially since, there's a lot of things that need funding, whether it be public transportation or education. I think $700 million, it's a hit that Washington State can't take.
Okay. Ms. Johnson, did you want to respond?
Yes. The OFM analysis is wrong, and an independent third-party think tank, the Sightline Institute, verified that and found I-732 to be revenue neutral. The OFM makes several errors, including failing to tax power that's exported out of Washington. They use the wrong growth rate for Washington State. We're growing faster than the rest of the country. They also use the wrong price on specified power, and they also double count the working families rebate in one fiscal year. So when you actually do it right, that actually adds back like $900 million. So I-732 is as close to revenue neutral as you can possibly have anything be that depends on modeling and economics.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're going back to Ms. Johnston. This next question, it's a follow-up. If this measure reduces state revenues, can it be adjusted to ensure that revenue neutrality at a later date? And if so, how could that be done?
Yes, it can. That's one thing. The legislature has that power. And the beauty of an initiative is that they have to maintain the intent of the initiative. Because this initiative was written to be revenue neutral, if for whatever reason it becomes revenue negative, they can adjust that and bring it back to revenue neutral. So that's one really cool thing.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Franks, do you want me to repeat that?
Yes.
Okay. So if this measure reduces state revenues, can it be adjusted to ensure revenue neutrality at a later date? And if so, how would that be done?
Well, it'll be a challenge. I think if it does pass and there needs to be adjustments, I think it'll be very difficult. I know it's very hard to, right now, there's a big political fight that happens, Unfortunately, if we want to see kind of the good stuff get put into a carbon policy, it's going to be a big political fight. And that's why we keep saying that when we do a plan to take on climate change, that has to be done right the first time. We can't have that fight in Olympia, especially since a lot of the folks that we represent are the most impacted, don't have access to going to Olympia, don't have the time. So if we want to have our proposals on the table, I think that we need to be more inclusive and look for a new initiative, one that really is more inclusive and really addresses the systemic issues that we all need to take on to transition to a new fossil fuel economy.
Okay, thank you. That's a perfect segue to, this is going to be your final question for each of you. So we'll start with Mr. Franks. What would be the consequences of failure? So, for instance, if Initiative 732 does not pass, how long would we have to wait for a new option? Are we making the perfect the enemy of the good?
There's nothing that's perfect, but I do believe in equity. And equity, when we come up with an issue, when we're trying to look for a solution as important as this one, I don't think we can get it wrong. And again, we need to transition and look for various different ways to tackle on climate change, whether it be public transportation, whether it be, moving in from fossil fuels to solar. We have to look it on from all the ways, and at the same time provide jobs that can help people that are going to be the most impacted. So for us, there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity for us. Climate change is a thing that we all talk about. Now we can talk about the real solutions that we need, and I don't think it's going to take 4 years. Or I think because we know the urgency, and we've been already feeling that urgency. A lot of us already have the solutions. All we need is an opportunity to put them forth.
And do you have a, just very quickly, just with a number, do you have an idea of how many years that would be if this doesn't pass?
I know we also are allied with Front and Centered. It's a community group, state coalition of community that represents people of color and poor people. We work with the Labor Council, so I think within 2 years, we're trying to come up with a new
Okay, thank you.
initiative.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Johnston, what would be the consequences of this failure if I-732 doesn't pass, and how long would we have to wait for a new option? Are we indeed making the perfect the enemy of the good?
I think that we are making the perfect the enemy of the good. Initiative 732 is a very effective first step, and we need to start somewhere. If we wait 2 years, we'll be in an off-year election. We have way less millennials, young people voting, and those are the people that are very crucial to this kind of an issue. To wait until the next presidential election, 4 more years from now, that gives us 1 year until we reach the 1.5-degree increase. That's not acceptable. We have been talking about this issue since I was in 5th grade, and I really, quite frankly, thought that we would have been a lot further than we are by now. And I think that this step, although Edgar is right, it doesn't address every issue, but we need to start somewhere, and it in no way precludes us from further addressing these issues and doing more. This is a first step and a huge win for the environmental movement if we can start somewhere and then continue to build on that.
Okay, it's time for closing statements. So we're going to start with Ms. Johnston, who's our pro on this initiative. Go ahead.
So I-732, as we said, is a revenue-neutral carbon tax swap. It puts that effective and rising price on CO2 while offsetting costs to Washingtonians by reducing other taxes. It's the strongest price on carbon in all of North America, and it makes the most progressive improvement to Washington tax code in over 40 years. I-732 is a bipartisan grassroots effort with support across the political spectrum and driven by volunteers who passionately care about doing something about climate change. Climate change is happening now. It is real, and we need immediate action. This is by no means the final solution to climate change, nor does it address all issues, but it is a starting point and a monumental first step in fighting climate change. This bipartisan action provides an example for the rest of the country and makes Washington a leader in the fight against climate change. We owe it to future generations to stop waiting and act now on climate change. Thank you, and vote yes on I-732.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Franks.
Okay, so we think that the climate change is the thing that we can all agree on that is going to affect us all. We also need to be more inclusive of all voices in the room, whether it be people of color, poor people, workers, to come up with a solution for climate change. We believe that it's bad tax policy. It's a regressive tax policy, carbon law. Again, $700 million. It's no small number, especially right now when in Washington we need to be funding a lot of programs and education. Carbon tax does not. Even though if it taxes, it does not do enough to transition into a new fossil fuel-free economy. And so it keeps affecting when polluters can keep paying to keep doing what they're doing with no way of moving away from the business practices in right now. So again, we urge people to think bigger than tax law.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. If we could just give our speakers a round of applause to thank them. It's great. Appreciate both of you putting that time in this morning. It's great. We'd just like to invite our next speakers up.
I just realized Yeah, I just realized I ran out without my notebook.
I did. Well, actually, no, I don't think. Oh, it was Carol
you.
Jacobson, I think, perhaps, who came. Oh, thank you. Say I'm a volunteer with the 1433. The initiative for, yeah, I guess. I don't, oh, Raise Up Washington is what's called.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're ready for our second forum out of our three. We have our speakers, which you'll notice we have had a change. We had on your handout, it says a different name, but this is our next ballot measure, Initiative 1433, the Minimum Wage and Paid Sick Leave Act, and representing the yes vote on I-1433 is volunteer Betsy Pernato for the Raise Up Washington campaign. And representing the no vote on I-1433 is Yvette Alada, a public policy consultant who has more than 10 years of working for nonprofits. So as stated on the ballot, initiative measure number I-1433 concerns labor standards. This measure would increase the state minimum wage to $11 in 2017, $11.50 in 2018, $12 in 2019, and $13.50 in 2020, require employers to provide paid sick leave and adopt related laws. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? So in summary, this measure concerns raising the minimum wage and requiring that employers provide paid sick leave. It would increase the hourly minimum wage statewide for employees who are at least 18 years old on a gradual scale to $13.50 starting January 1st. Increases after 2020 would be tied to the rate of inflation. The measure would require employers to provide paid sick leave at a rate of 1 hour for every 40 hours worked starting in 2018. So we're going to go ahead and start with your opening statements. You have 1 minute. And we're going to start with Ms. Pernato. Would you please give us your opening statement?
Okay, thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to speak and for holding this forum. Initiative 1433 will boost wages for 730,000 low-income workers in Washington state and allow more than 1 million workers to earn paid sick and safe leave. This initiative is needed because real wages, that is wages adjusted for inflation, have not gone up since the mid-1970s. While productivity has increased, workers have not seen a real increase in their wages. In our community, 18% of people in Whatcom County live below the federal poverty level. And in a study done by the United Ways of Northwest Washington, another 24% live in a very precarious situation with no savings. Therefore, we need to raise the minimum wage to support low-wage workers in Washington. Thank you.
Okay, and Ms. Alada.
Hi, thank you also for having me here to present this side of the issue. So I want to clarify that issue 1433 is not a debate about whether or not to raise the minimum wage. We're here to debate about the package that's put together and the policies and the level and the rate that the minimum wage will be increased. Which is 1433. So there are members of our coalition who have worked towards raising the minimum wage, but we've all come together to oppose 1433 because the rate and the level at which 1433 increases the minimum wage is too fast and too much for the various communities in Washington to be able to handle. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And you both are clear about your challenge questions that you'll have during the opportunity. You can raise it for 45 seconds. Okay, thanks. Okay, so we're going to start with you, Ms. Alada. Does the current Washington state minimum wage of $9.47 an hour or 953 in 2017, provide a full-time worker the basic necessities of life without the need for public or private assistance? And would 1350 achieve that for an individual or a family?
So that may not provide all of the assistance, but if you look at what people that qualify for those programs get, they're getting more of a benefit than what the difference between the 947 and the 1350 would give. Because if you look at, so part of the way that if you look at the financial analysis on it from the Office of Fiscal Management, they are cutting government spending by reducing SNAP programs and other programs to pay for this. So really people are coming off possibly worse off because they are now do not qualify for other programs.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pernado, want me to read that again?
Yes, please.
Okay. Does the current Washington state minimum wage of $9.47 an hour or $9.53 in 2017 provide a full-time worker the basic necessities of life without the need for public or private assistance? And would $13.50 achieve that for an individual or a family?
The current minimum wage does not provide families with the ability to live in any kind of stable situation. In fact, the Alice report from the United Way indicated that for a single person, they need a stability income of $29,000. That's an income of about $14.76 an hour. And I would argue that to say that workers are going to be worse off if they are making $13.50, what we're saying basically is that businesses are being subsidized by taxpayers, that if businesses do not pay workers enough, that we as the public are forced to make up those differences. $13.50 is not enough. I believe it should be higher, but it was recognized that in some communities that would be a stretch for employers.
Okay, and I just want to point out to both of you that the yellow means you have 15 more seconds, because I think you're both cutting yourselves off, but that's great, that's fine. All right, so Ms. Pernado, why is this initiative on the November's ballot? Is raising the minimum wage an urgent priority? Why or why not?
I think it is an urgent priority. Again, I'm going to refer to the study that was done by the League of Women Voters looking at women's economic security in our own area, that people are hurting. Secondly, the Alice study that 42% of people in our community are in a very precarious economic situation. We know that rents are very unaffordable throughout Washington, and that homelessness has gone up. And in Whatcom County or Bellingham, 1 in 5 families use the Bellingham Food Bank. I think it is definitely a priority.
Okay, thank you.
I think if you're talking about urgent priorities, poverty is absolutely an urgent priority. And if you're trying to address income inequality, the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage in this way is not the way to address it. If you look at what this does, when you're talking about raising the minimum wage, you have a lateral redistribution of wealth versus a vertical redistribution of wealth. So that means that instead of money coming from the top to come down, you have just an exchange between the middle and lower income levels. So what it does is it makes the gap between the highest wage earners and middle wage earners greater, which means greater income inequality, and the gap between the lowest and the middle, it makes it smaller. So basically it's squeezing out of the middle income workers. So this is not the way to address any of those problems, homelessness or sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Okay, jeez, let's stop.
Okay.
Can I ask?
You may.
Okay. So how you said that it will increase inequality. Mm-hmm. What would your solution be to transferring wealth from the top to the bottom?
So if you want to do that, you have to think of programs that are not regressive policies. You've already had a whole conversation, debate about regressive policies ahead of this one. So our coalition had looked at $12 and doing that by 2020. And the evidence shows that if you want to, stimulate the economy, going beyond that would not be stimulating the economy. And what it will do is, if you look at in 1998, when it was tied to the CPI, you alluded to that, the unemployment rate was 4.5. Currently, the unemployment rate in Washington State is 5.7, the 8th highest in the country, which is not what it was when we first passed an initiative like this, saying that it was going to solve these problems, and here we are today.
Thank you. Did you want to respond then?
I would respond that
Oh,
and
you know what? I beg your pardon.
Oh.
Because you asked your question.
Oh, okay.
I beg your
All
pardon.
right.
Okay. All right. We're going back to to our next question, and I'm going to be asking Ms. Alada this question first. This initiative would also require employers to provide 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 40 hours worked. What would be the impact of this provision on the employee, and what would its effect be on the workplace?
So I want to address that. Again, this isn't a debate about whether or not to raise the minimum wage. It's a debate about what 1433 is. And bringing up the sick leave, if you add the sick leave component into the wage, you're adding over 30 cents. It comes out to about $13.88 an hour by 2020 if you add the sick leave in. So again, it's just, the way this is put together is not the way to do it. This is a very complex issue that needs to address all of the issues of regional areas and the different economic challenges of the different areas. So unfortunately, there's good goals that are trying to be accomplished through this initiative, but it's not going to solve those problems.
Okay. Ms. Permano, do you want to answer that question? Do you want me to repeat it for
Yes.
you? Okay. This initiative would also require employers to provide 1 hour of paid sick leave for every 40 hours worked. What would be the impact of this provision on the employee, and what would its effect be on the workplace?
Well, first, on the workplace, one of the things we know is that when employees have paid sick leave, that they rarely use all of it. They usually use only about half of it. One of the things is it means that workers will not be coming to work ill and infecting other people. And I'd like to just give an example of what happened when a worker came to work ill in Whatcom County, when the public health department was forced twice to close Applebee's, and many people ended up with a stomach flu in the workplace and people who ate there. It would also mean that workers would be able to take time off for their children when they're ill, so they don't have to send children to daycare ill, and that they don't have to have older children stay home to take care of the younger children. So overall, it has tremendous public health impacts, and actually flu transmission has been shown to decrease in areas where they have paid sick leave.
Okay, thank you. And we have a challenge question.
Yes, I would like to challenge that. So this issue that came up has been addressed by the legislature. So we have laws protecting the public from contamination in the food. So that's already been addressed and with the legislature.
Do you want to respond?
Do it?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, workers are not supposed to come to work ill, but the fact is that many workers cannot afford to take time off, and say they do come to work ill, and the fact that there was a transmission of norovirus by employees to the public at Applebee's shows quite clearly that workers do come to work sick, and many workers report that they come to work sick even though legally they are not supposed to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, starting with you again. So from what workers and businesses would most be affected by this initiative? And from your perspective, what would that effect be? This is for Ms. Pernato.
So low-wage workers are typically in certain industries, often in restaurants, home health care aides, service jobs of all types. And as far as the effects you're saying on businesses, many businesses, in fact, have endorsed 1433. The Greater Seattle Business Alliance has endorsed it. The Main Street Alliance has endorsed it. Employers who have enacted these increases in the minimum wage find that they have reduced turnover in employees. And there have been local businesses, including Village Books and Paper Dreams, that have also endorsed it. So employers recognize once they institute it that it isn't that big of a deal.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what workers and businesses would be most affected by this initiative, and from your perspective, what would that effect be?
So I want to talk about restaurants. Restaurants operate on razor-thin margins. If you have any friends that have restaurants, or if you even just, it's kind of a statistic that's just one of those ones that's known that like half of all restaurants that open fail, close down within a couple years. That's because the margins are so razor-thin. We're talking about 4%. Now, this is an increase in their labor costs of 42%. So that math doesn't add up. This is going to very much hurt restaurants. As well as if you want to talk about home health care workers, the people that they serve are seniors. Seniors live on a fixed income. They cannot afford to have their prices raised by 30%. And that's who would also be, you have to take in consideration all the minorities of people that will be affected by this. It's going to push people out of their jobs. Like I said, from 1998 to now, there is a 1 percentage point, greater than a 1 percentage point increase in unemployment,
Thank you.
which will continue.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. a lot of this is going to you, too. If this passes, does it eliminate tipping for the service industry? And what effect will that have on consumers as well as the employees of those industries?
So this doesn't necessarily eliminate tipping. It might disincentivize tipping, but businesses are able to compensate for that cost however they want. I do know that there are some tipped workers that are not actually happy with what has happened in Seattle because it's made their revenue, their incomes go down. So it's not. Employers are free to figure out how to compensate for this change, including being able to shut down
Okay, thank you.
and lay off workers.
Okay, Ms. Permanato. So if this does pass, does it eliminate tipping for the service industry? And what effect would that have on consumers as well as employees?
It does not eliminate tipping, and I think it's going to vary greatly. I'm not sure that it's going to raise prices as much as people are concerned. There was a meta-analysis looking at 30 different studies that found a 10% increase in the minimum wage resulted in a price increase of less than 0.5%. And businesses have a lot of other costs besides workers, and if it has the effect of reducing turnover in workers, that saves employers training costs.
Okay, thanks. And we have a challenge.
So I just want to point out the number. She just said 10% increase won't affect prices. So we're not looking at a 10% increase here. And that meta-analysis that she's speaking about also said that one way that employers can compensate for increased costs is to reduce hours. So again, the worker who is hoping to take home a greater paycheck is not necessarily taking home a greater paycheck if their hours are reduced.
You want to respond?
The study in Seattle that looked at the minimum wage increase found that prices increased very little, if at all.
Okay. Do you want to use this is your final challenge.
The same researchers in the same study also did a survey of what employers were doing to compensate and what they will do or what they have done. And 30% said they would raise prices. So, and many of them, 11% said they would, well, this was for Seattle, so they were going to leave Seattle. But
Do you want to respond?
Well, there was a study that looked at, go back to 2014 in the election, a number of states raised minimum wage. And those states that raised the minimum wage, they are actually doing better economically than those states that did not.
Okay, thank you.
again, the level matters.
We're going to move to our next question. And this starts with you, Ms. Pernato. Bellingham has one of the highest unemployment rates in Washington. Will the raise of the minimum wage cause the loss of more jobs in our communities?
I don't see why it would have a disproportionate effect on Bellingham. This levels the playing field because it would create an increase in the minimum wage across the state. And numerous studies have shown that there is a very minimal, if no, employment effect when the minimum wage is raised. There was a study in 2010 that looked at state and county borders in where there was a minimum wage raised in one area and not in the other, and there were no employment changes found following an increase. A 2009 study that looked at 64, it was a meta-analysis of 64 other studies, showed essentially no employment effect following minimum wage increases. I would not expect that Bellingham would see that.
I want you to listen to the language, essentially, minimal. That doesn't mean none. And when you're talking about that overall economy, if it's 1% loss, that may be not catastrophic to an overall economy. But if you're talking about a 5%, almost 6% unemployment rate already for the state, that's just the state, and you're adding a greater unemployment rate, to those people, that 6 to 7% of people that are unemployed, that is a really big problem. So while overall minimal doesn't sound bad to everybody else, to the person that doesn't have a job, it's their whole world.
Okay, thank you. Should this is going to Ms. Alada, should this ballot measure have included, as some opponents argue, exemptions for certain job categories, such as small retail business and seasonal jobs? And please explain your reasons for your opinion.
So I think this brings up exactly the problems that we see with just 1433 in general. There are a lot of things that need to be considered in this. One of them that we're concerned about is a cap on the sick leave. One of them is that, this should be something more similar to the Oregon model where they have tiers of minimum wage. All of these things need to be teased out and considered. And yes, one of the things is a training wage. So if you look at in Europe, and many of the studies show that that the high youth unemployment in Europe is attributed to the inflated wages there. And so what you're doing is, and other studies show that it's easier to find a job when you already have a job. So you're pushing out and penalizing people with less experience because they can't get in. If you're an employer, you're going to take the person that's overqualified or fully trained over someone that you have to take the time and resources to train.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat that?
Yes.
Okay. Should this ballot measure have included, as some opponents argue, exemptions for certain job categories such as retail business and seasonal jobs? And please explain the reason for your opinion.
No, I don't think that it should have included those things. And one of the things I think is that you need to look at the population that is making less than $13.50 an hour. Approximately 53%, more than half of those who make $13.50 an hour are over 30 years of age. Another 13% are over 55. Only 9% are teenagers. And so I think, and 59% of those making below $13.50 are full-time workers. When we look at poverty in our community, when we look at what it takes to survive, in fact, not just survive, but have some kind of a stable life, we realize that the current minimum wage is not enough, and the adjusted minimum wage next year after the inflation is not enough. We definitely need to raise the minimum wage substantially in Washington State.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to you, Betsy. Are there, as some business groups say, unintended consequences for employees, such as decreased hours or layoffs because of already marginal profit lines?
Who's that for?
Sorry, for Ms. Coronado.
Well, I would respond that some businesses always say that whenever there is a proposed increase in wages or benefits from workers, that's a very common response. But as I mentioned previously, the Greater Seattle Business Alliance supports it, the Main Street Alliance supports it, there are local businesses that support it. I collected signatures for 1433, and I had business owners who came up to me and said, of course the minimum wage needs to be higher than this. I pay more than that myself. So I think that businesses always make those kind of arguments, but I also think that after this, the paid sick leave went into effect in Seattle, many businesses found that it wasn't onerous and that it didn't cause them to lose money.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to repeat that, or?
Go ahead, thanks.
Okay. So are there some, as business groups say, unintended consequences for employees, such as the decreased hours or layoffs because of already marginal profit lines? And what's your view of this argument?
Yes, there actually are. And let's look at what Barack Obama's former chairman of his Council of Economic Advisors has said. He wrote in an op-ed last year that looking at, it was called "How Much Minimum Wage is Too Much?" And he argued that anything over 12 is too risky. It's too risky. And if you look at the Rand Corporation, who does independent public policy analysis, they've said that a wage increase above a $12 increase by 2020 is unprecedented in this country in a historical context. Yes, in 2014, 2015, there were some states that passed a greater minimum wage, but those have not been studied. We don't know. And if Washington wants to experiment in an economy where they're already the 8th highest unemployment rate, I think that's a risk that is just too great.
Thank you. We're going to start with you again this time, Ms. Alada. Wouldn't this level the playing field? If every business had to raise the wage, then all could adjust the same way?
So that oversimplifies what happens in the economy. You have different types of businesses, and different costs for things. So if you raise bread 30%, that's a different impact than raising a car 30%. I mean, it's not across the board. You can't look at things in economics and in business and in industry that way. And if you look at, it's actually going to push out other types of jobs like manufacturing. Last year, the Seattle Times did a story on Cascade Design, which moved a fifth of its workers out of state into Nevada after the Seattle minimum wage increase.
Ms. Pernato, do you want me to read that again? Mm-hmm. So wouldn't this level the playing field? If every business had to raise the wage, then all could adjust the same way?
Yes, I would agree that it would. I think it does. I think it doesn't put any business at a disadvantage. And as I mentioned previously, in states that raised the minimum wage, those states were doing better economically than those that did not.
You're out. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
You don't have any left, any challenges, so
okay.
You used your 3. So I'm going to, go to the next question. Ms. Pernato, each of you represents a very different view on how I-1433 would impact the state's overall economy. Please provide evidence for your opinion.
I'm not a researcher, and I can only cite the research that other people have done, but I will talk about my own experience, and that is working with low-income people. And in my job at the health department, I see people every day that are homeless. I see people that can barely get by. I see people that can't afford food. And I think that when you put money into the pocket of low-income workers, those workers are the customers of another business. They spend their money locally. That money will go into the economy. And if it means that those people do no longer qualify for public benefits, that's a savings to the state. And it allows people to live a fuller life.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Alada.
So I actually am a researcher. I did research for the U.S. Department of Labor when I was and consulted with Impact International, which actually is here, also has an office in Seattle, looking at different policy programs. So from my look at all of the research, and actually I want to get to how I got into this. I went and got into public policy after working with nonprofits and groups like the United Way. I was consulting with the United Way. So I deeply care about low-income families and single moms and homeless. I developed a dental program for homeless children. So I am very much concerned about how those people will be affected. And when you look at what the research shows, it shows that anything above $12 at 2020 is what we have data for. We don't have data beyond that. The Seattle Times says this is an experiment.
Okay, thank you. All right. This is going to be your last question. How difficult would it be, and we're going to start with Ms. Alada, how difficult would it be to amend this bill to even higher amounts should the will of the people indicate that preference after this passes?
I'm sorry, can you repeat one more time?
How difficult would it be to amend this bill to an even higher amounts should the will of the people indicate that preference after this initiative were to pass? Should it pass?
So can the legislature increase it? Is that the question? I'm sorry, I don't
Yes.
really understand.
So if this measure were to pass, would it be possible, or how difficult might it, or how would the bill, if the will of the people was to have an even higher minimum wage, how would that take place?
I mean, the legislature, I hope they're listening to the will of the people, but I don't, as far as how difficult it would be, I can't answer that. I think it's the same for any law, so for me to say specifically to the minimum wage, I don't really see how that relates. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think it would be extremely difficult for the legislature to do this, given the current Washington State legislature. There have been, I think that the House has raised the minimum wage, has passed a bill, and it could not get out of the Senate. And I think that they also passed a paid sick leave, and it could not get out of the Senate. So it seems like it would be very difficult. I will say that when I was collecting signatures, many people said, it's only $13.50. That's not nearly enough for people to get by.
I'm sorry, I think I didn't understand the question. Can I go ahead and answer that?
It was a confusing question. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys another question.
Oh,
I think it was a challenging question.
I mean, because if she answered it as if if it didn't pass, so I would have answered, if I understood it that way, I would have answered it that way too.
I think it was a confusing question. I apologize.
It's okay.
So let's do one more question from each of you. And we're going to start with Ms. Pernato. If this initiative fails, what, if any, alternative measure would you support?
Well, that's a difficult one. I think it's very difficult to put an initiative on the ballot. Takes a lot of effort. I could imagine that could happen in a subsequent year, but it's also very difficult to imagine the legislature actually having the will to enact this. And I think that there would probably be efforts at local levels to try to increase the minimum wage in various communities.
Thank you.
I think that the research and the data is still being collected on what's going on right now with raising of the minimum wage. So what I think would be good for Washington to do is to really look at the data, study what's going on in the other states. There's a really great organization called the Poverty Action Lab out of MIT, and they do evidence-based policies. They research evidence-based policies to look at what are the most impactful ways to end poverty. And I think that Washington should take its time and really consider, again, with having the 8th highest unemployment rate and growing that from what happened in 1998 when they tried to do this before, that only led to a greater unemployment rate. I think we need to get more data and get together and see what are the solutions that are really going to impact the lowest of wage earners in the state.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to ask each of you to provide a 1-minute closing statement, and we're going to start with Ms. Pernado, who is on the pro side of this initiative.
Okay. Again, I will repeat that it's going to benefit 750,000 workers in Washington state if the minimum wage is boosted, and more than 1 million workers will be able to earn paid sick and safe leave. This is needed because we have very high poverty rates in our community, and there is a growing divide between the rich and the poor. This initiative is supported by a broad and diverse coalition that includes the League of Women Voters, thank you very much, the National Physicians Association, the Children's Alliance, the NAACP, many local businesses and business alliances, the Church Council of Greater Seattle, and the Faith Action Network. I encourage you to please vote for 1433.
Again, this is an experiment, an unprecedented experiment in a state where you have very high unemployment already. It would compound the problem. And again, if you're looking at addressing income inequality, this does not address income inequality. It is a feel-good thing that makes some people that have more money feel like they're helping others, when if you look at the data, it doesn't show that it's helping others. There are great programs that help people, like the Earned Income Tax Credit. There are other ways to resolve this. Minimum wage does not have evidence of helping people get out of poverty. And if you're talking about the 730,000 people on minimum wage, if the 1% lose their jobs, that's 7,300 jobs that this initiative would push people out of.
All right.
I encourage you to vote no.
All right. Thank you so much, Yvette Alada and Betsy Pernado, for presenting to us this morning. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thanks.
Okay.
Don't ask me.
Hello.
How's your flight?
My flight?
Oh, I thought you lived in Vegas.
No, I live up here in Seattle.
Oh, good.
So I
Well, how's
have
your drive?
It was a long drive.
Remind you did a great job. But just you want, don't always look at me.
Okay.
Where's the camera?
I think it's hanging over there.
But there's one over there too.
Yeah, so probably both.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who wants to smile? Well, okay. Just look serious. You're gonna be disappointed.
Okay. This is our third and final ballot measure. And we've got our pro and our con speakers up here. As you can see, our con speaker is again Yvette Alada, who is representing the no vote, and who you've met during our last segment. And then representing the yes vote on I-1464 is Ken Mann, who's currently serving his second term on the Whatcom County Council. So just a reminder, the same ground rules apply. You're going to have a 1-minute opening statement, 1 minute for each answer, and a minute closing. And if you wish to challenge your opponent's response, just show me that challenging card. And then you'll have 45 seconds to make your challenge, and then your opponent will have 45 seconds to respond. So any other questions about that? You guys are ready? All right, and also just a reminder from the audience, I was getting nervous we were going to run out of questions. So please, forward your questions if you have any, and which will, because we really do want to hear from you too. So, as this measure appears on the ballot, initiative measure number 1464 concerns campaign finance laws and lobbyists. This measure would create a campaign finance system, allow residents to direct state funds to candidates, repeal the non-resident sales tax exemptions, restrict lobbying employment by certain former public employees, and add enforcement requirements. Should this measure be enacted into law, Yes or no? So in summary, this measure would create a state-funded campaign finance program allowing residents to direct up to 3 $50 contributions to candidates for certain state offices. It would repeal the non-resident sales tax exemption, directing resulting funds to this program. It would restrict lobbying employment by certain former public employees, restrict campaign contributions from lobbyists and state contractors, increase penalties for campaign finance violations, increase campaign finance administration and enforcement, and revise campaign finance and disclosure laws. Whew. So, speaking for this initiative is Mr. Mann. If you want to go ahead and give us your 1-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you, Rebecca. And again, thank you to the League for hosting this event and all the other events that you do. It's very critical that we can talk and have time to talk about all these issues. I'm here to ask you to vote yes on Initiative 1464 so we can limit the influence of money in our elections and in government policy. We have to give people a stronger voice in the political process. For a while now, we've all seen it, lobbyists and wealthy individuals and special interest groups have had too much control and too much access. The system isn't working, and I say that as somebody who is inside the system, who has succeeded in the system, but I see it as a broken system, and we need to fix it. Initiative 1464 is a great start, and it's supported by a range of organizations and leaders from across the state, from the King County Democrats and the Tea Party Patriots, Faith Action Network, and the Progress Alliance. Please join me in voting yes on 1464.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Olata, you want to give us your 1-minute opening, please?
Sure. Thank you so much. I think it is really important that there is time to talk about these issues because in other groups, I've gotten 2 minutes, and these things are very complicated, as you've seen from the previous 2 debates, and too complicated to get through in that short time. So thank you for doing this. And one of those things that I really want to bring up in 1464, we all want to clean up politics, especially right now. We've all seen the debates, we've seen what's going on, and politics has gotten really dirty, and the discourse is very nasty. But with that goal in mind, understand that 1464 is not going to help that. That's not going to solve these problems. It's a worthy goal, but this isn't going to fix that. Initiative 1464 pits really important priorities of the state against funding political campaigns.
Thank you. We're going to start with you, Ms. Olata, on the questions. So the first one is, if voters approve this initiative, state elected officials could not become lobbyists for 3 years after they leave office. What's your view about the effect of this that this proposal would have?
The effect would be it's an excessive cooling off period. A lot of other places have a 1-year cooling off period. But I would like to talk about, like, what is the purpose of democracy? And when you have a representative government, you have to address that legislative body. And the previous question was asked, what the legislature would do about, if the will of the people were something, right? Well, that's exactly it. If you're restricting access to those legislators, then you're restricting democracy. And that's why that's not a good idea to be doing. And it's just an excessive amount of time as well. There is in California, there was a woman who was the head of the Senate, and she went on because she became so impassioned with education reform. She is now the head of Democrats for Education Reform. Now, barring her from a job fixing education, is that something we really want in a democratic process?
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so if voters approve this initiative, state elected officials could not become lobbyists for 3 years after they leave office. What's your view about the effect this proposal would have?
I think it's a great idea. And frankly, 3 years isn't even long enough. Why not make it 10 or 20 years? Why should people who are in office develop those important relationships with their colleagues, then have the opportunity to turn around right away and start being paid lobbyists. It's not a healthy system at all, and I don't see any benefit to promoting that revolving door from legislator to lobbyist. And the one example that Ms. Alada gave, okay, that's one example nationwide, but that person doesn't even have to be a lobbyist or a registered lobbyist to do all that good work and help support kids or education or anything else. So we do not need lobbyists and the revolving door, and that has to change. So I'd advocate for more than 3 years, but 3 years is what is in this initiative.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Mann, second question goes to you. If adopted, I-1464 would limit donations from lobbyists to $100 per candidate and $500 total, and impose the same limits on funds they raise from others. Do you think that this conflicts with the Supreme Court decision that political donations are a form of free speech?
Well, I don't, that's not one of my favorite Supreme Court rulings, so I can't really, I'm not going to argue that, but I don't think money is speech, and I think anything that levels the playing field for regular folks to have equal standing as far as how much they can donate to political campaigns is a good thing. And I know that this initiative was crafted specifically to avoid conflicting with that Supreme Court ruling, Citizens United, and there is, in fact, another initiative on the ballot that tackles the Citizens United issue. So my answer is no, it doesn't conflict with the Supreme Court, and it's a good idea.
So I would agree, it doesn't conflict, and that's where the problem with 1464 comes, is that it's not going to get money out of politics. You still can have unlimited independent expenditures even if 1464 is passed. So you're going to have a lot of money still in politics. It's not going to clean up politics. It's the law of the land, unfortunately, that Supreme Court ruling, whether you agree or disagree on it, and 1464 will not limit any of those. In fact, the other problem is that it's entirely optional. The credits are optional. You do not have to take them. So there's still an incentive for a candidate to go and the old-fashioned way and raise as much money as they'd like. So you're not limiting the money that's going to be spent in campaigns. Which is why the Seattle Times and the Tacoma News Tribune and many other publications have endorsed a no position on 1464.
Thank you. Ms. Alada, the third question goes to you first. I-1464 requires candidates to list the names of their top 5 donors in campaign advertising and also list the names of the top 5 donors to organizations on that list. Mm-hmm. To what extent would this make election funding more transparent?
Well, it doesn't actually make it more transparent. The attempt is, and I see where the intent is there, but it doesn't actually do that because, and I'll read you an example because every time I try to give one, it doesn't come out well. You have to list them, but it doesn't mean that that money necessarily went to pay for that ad. So you can have an organization that they've worked together in the past, but because they've been a larger donor, then has to be listed on a campaign ad when really they might not have had anything to do with it. So the example that I can give you is, Comcast may write a check to their industry group, that Broadband Communications PAC, who may write a check to the House Democrats' Truman Fund. The Truman Fund may in turn write a contribution to Fuse Washington, a liberal group that provides communication strategies. Fuse Washington, which has actively attacked Comcast, could then be required to list Comcast as a top contributor, even though those groups have nothing in common and haven't worked on anything in common in the past. So it's really confusing.
Thank you.
I have more faith in the people to understand when they're being given more information, how to interpret it. Again, we're given a very convoluted, extreme exception as an example of why this is not a perfect initiative. Maybe it isn't perfect. In fact, there's a few things I would change about it, but it's a very, very good start. It's an excellent start. And when you can form a a PAC or something that's called People for a Better World, and then donate it to the People for Clean Energy, and then you're really just, a coal front group, nobody wins. You need to be able to see who is actually donating the money, what individuals, what corporations are funneling that money to these innocuous-sounding names, and that's what this initiative does.
And Ms. Alada has a follow-up or a challenge question to this.
Yeah, so why this is not a good start is because this pits priorities like education and transportation and health, all those services that need to be provided through the budget, the general fund. The authors of this could have written it however they wanted to write it. That is what you do. You write it and you put what you think is the perfect law onto the ballot. And what they did was, if the money is not raised through the tax exemption, it comes out of the general fund. So you're putting campaign money into taxpayer dollars into campaigns over funding what the state really needs to be funding and the priorities of this state.
Okay, that was not quite a challenge to his point, but we're going to go ahead and let you respond to that.
Well, that's just not true. The money that will be raised in this initiative comes from closing the out-of-state sales tax loophole. The Department of Revenue and all the other folks that have looked at it have said there's going to be more than enough money to cover it, and that's using the most conservative estimates. That is a non-issue.
The Seattle Times doesn't agree.
Okay, and we're going to ask for our panelists to be respectful of each other's time, if you could. I'm going to ask a follow-up question, starting with you, Ms. Alada. Who are the top 5 donors to your side of this issue?
Top 5? I don't even know if we have 5. I don't even know if we have 5, and that is actually another issue. If you look at who is donating to the other side, it's a lot of out-of-state money and a lot of billionaires giving to the other side. And our coalition is, top 2 I can name is I can't name the top 2, the contractors. And yeah, to get money, it's a lot of money on the other side to get money out of politics.
Okay, Mr. Mann, do you know who the top 5 donors are to the pro side of the
I have
initiative?
no idea. I know that I'm here today as a volunteer. I'm pretty sure Ms. Alada is here as a paid lobbyist. That
Nope.
pretty much tells you all you need to know.
Actually not.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. This, we're starting with Mr.
I was a
Mann.
paid lobbyist. I know who's paying me.
Okay. Mr. Mann, we're going to start with you on this question. This initiative would establish a state fund to provide registered voters who choose to participate with 3 $50 democracy credit vouchers that they could contribute to as many as 3 candidates. How would that affect who runs for office and who finances their campaigns?
Well, I think it would affect it because anybody could run for office. Anybody could get a grassroots off-the-ground campaign, which I think is incredibly important. Right now, you have to go around and essentially work the donor pools to even get your campaign started. I think this will increase the pool of candidates. I think it will level the playing field for all candidates, and that's exactly what we need. That's exactly what this initiative is designed to do, and that's why I support it.
Can you read the question
I'd be
again,
happy
please?
to.
Thanks.
This initiative would establish a state fund to provide registered voters who choose to participate with 3 $50 democracy credit vouchers that they could contribute to as many as 3 candidates. How would that affect who runs for office and who finances their campaigns?
Well, so in order to qualify for the democracy credits, you still have to have 75 donors. So there is an argument that this could mean that there's more people running, and then there's an argument that it might not. What we've seen in Seattle is they have a very something similar to this in Seattle right now. It has gotten larger, and if you look at other places where there's more people on the ballot, I would say that anything that's done in policy has a consequence. So you have to weigh out what's a better objective. So more people on the ballot also actually leads to there being people being elected by smaller amounts of people. So we don't really know, if that was who people wanted to be representing them. If you look at Europe, their system is they have a lot of people on the ballot, but you get to rank. So if your top choice, and this is really complicated to say in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with you again.
Wait, can I respond to that?
You responded, but you do have a challenge.
Okay, I'll use one of my challenges if I could. I think more people on the ballot is a good thing in all situations. And this idea of having ranked choice, I love ranked choice voting. I look forward to next year when you're here advocating for that one on the ballot. That would definitely
If it's
be
on
an
there.
improvement. But we need more citizen engagement, not less. We need less lobbyist control over puppet legislators, and this would absolutely help do that.
And Ms. Alata, you can respond to that, to his challenge.
I don't think the debate is about should there or shouldn't be less or more influence. That's not what we're debating. The issue and the problems with 1464, while I said already starting out, the goals are good, it pits financing campaigns against other priorities that the state needs to be doing. And it actually is absolutely true that the money does come out of the general fund. I encourage all of you to go read this and read where the money is going to come from if the money isn't raised through the sales tax. And they wrote it that way because they might not raise that money.
All right, you're using your second challenge.
Second challenge. The Department of Revenue and the JLARC have all studied this and said there's more than enough money from closing the out-of-state sales tax loophole. There is no risk to this depleting our general fund and competing against other priorities.
But it was written in there, so they had to anticipate that there could be. And as the person that was up here first, I'm sorry, I don't know her name, she even alluded to the fact that, or not alluded, said that the Office of Fiscal Management could be wrong. So,
Quote them.
Okay, thank you. Next question goes to Ms. Alata. How do other states handle citizen funding of elections? Is this initiative the most effective approach?
so I am not privy to how a lot of other states, I didn't draft this measure. My concern about it is really about, again, the general fund. I can't speak to what a lot of other states do. I know on a general basis there's some, can name some states that do this, but if you look at what we've done federally, on the federal level, we had McCain-Feingold, and that was something that was supposed to clean up politics too. And I don't know about you, but politics don't seem any nicer or cleaner or better since we've done that. So again, the goals are worthy goals, but is this how we want to do it? And it doesn't mean there aren't some things that should be teased out later through the legislature of implementing, but this as a package, as 1464, and how it's being funded is really not the best way to go about this.
Thank you. Mr. Mann, are you aware of how other states handle citizen funding of election, and is this the initiative the most effective approach?
There are 18 other states that have similar voluntary voter funding programs in place, from Arkansas, Minnesota, Ohio, Oregon, Virginia, just for examples. And just like in our system, it's a voluntary system, and they get to decide where to allocate their democracy credit, is what we call it. And it's working in those states. This was modeled on those 18 other states. So there is a proof of concept here, and it'll work.
I do know one example,
All right.
actually, that an editor brought up to me, that there is some issues in, I think it's Arizona, where they're having some issues, and actually people had passed something like this, and now they kind of want to take it back. So, research that. I encourage you to research that. It's just something I had heard from an editor of a paper.
Do you want to respond to her challenge?
Sure. I mean, once again, it's just sort of an unsubstantiated, far-flung, isolated example as a means to discredit the entire proposal. I don't think that's a really viable way to actually debate the merits of this issue. And I didn't even mention Arizona as a place that was trying this.
Okay. Mr. Mann, we're going to go to the next question, starting with you. To provide state funds for the vouchers, I-1464 proposes eliminating the current sales tax exemption for non-residents. Please be specific about how that would impact the state budget.
It will not impact the state budget.
Okay, all right. Ms. Alada, do you want to respond to that?
Well, okay, so partly that's true. So it won't affect the state budget unless they cannot raise enough money from the tax dollars that come in. And I would argue that if you are closing that tax loophole, shouldn't that money go to other things that we have a problem funding in the state over political campaigns? I mean, that's the issue here is where is the money coming from? The goals, good objectives, how it's getting done, that is the issue here, and that is why 1464 is not a good initiative.
You use your last challenge.
I'm using
All
it,
right.
I'm risking it.
Thank you.
I think that the mission of this initiative is as important as any other issue that we face. Getting money out of politics will break up this logjam that we have and allow us to address the issues that are important to the people. The people are going to be having more control over their representatives, more control over the decisions they make, and then we can fund things like education and get programs moving instead of the gridlock we're seeing nationwide. So I put this up there at the top with everything else, and I will say, again, this will not impact the state budget.
When it does, I'll come tell you that.
Would you like to respond to his challenge?
No, does that count as my challenge? No.
No, you're responding.
It's a free.
No, it was written so that if the money doesn't come up from the closing of the tax loophole, it will come out of the general fund. And again, to say that funding politicians' campaigns, I'm the only one up here that's not a politician, to say funding politicians' campaigns is more important than transportation, which is, by the way, in Seattle, they've got huge, massive tax increases that they're trying to pass to get that transportation. So that money has to come from somewhere. And you're going to prioritize funding political campaigns over transportation and education and any of those other services that the state needs to be funding.
Thank you. All right. This question now goes back to Ms. Alada. Why is this proposal on the November ballot? Is it a priority for the citizens of Washington to resolve the issues that the initiative addresses without further delay?
I mean, I suppose that's why they put it on the ballot. You have two initiatives that kind of address this. So it is an important thing to address, and it's something that the legislature should look at, and all governing bodies should look at how campaigns are being funded. But again, is it more urgent than finding funding for schools and addressing McCleary and the transportation issues and the carbon tax? Is it more important than all of those things? I don't know. I think it's something that needs to go to the legislature to tease out and look at how we can address this.
Thank you. Do you want me to repeat that?
Sure.
Okay. So why is this proposal on the November ballot? Is it a priority for the citizens of Washington to resolve the issues that this initiative addresses without further delay?
Absolutely. This is an urgent issue. We need to get money out of politics, make politics more transparent. There's more to this initiative than just voluntary voter-driven funding of campaigns. There's ending the revolving door of lobbyists. There's disclosing the names on super PACs. It limits the amount of money that lobbyists can give, as well as contractors who seek to bid for work with the state. There is at least 5 or 6 different elements to this initiative. All of them are very important, and it's important that we pass it this year.
Thank you. And you have a challenge, I saw. Your last final challenge.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought because I was listening to what else you were saying.
How about we come back to your challenge? We'll save it.
Thanks.
Okay? All right. So, Mr. Mann, I'm going to bring this.
Oh, I remembered it. I'm sorry.
Here we go. All right.
Sorry.
Timers, are you ready? This is
Yeah,
great.
okay.
All right.
He mentioned getting money out of politics, and I want to reiterate, this will not get that money out of politics. Again, you have Citizens United, and unfortunately, that is not going to limit money in politics. You're going to have unlimited independent expenditures that this does not limit.
And you have 45 seconds to
I
respond.
agree, this doesn't solve every problem that we face regarding money in politics. Initiative 735 is something you should also vote for so that we can work towards getting rid of Citizens United.
Okay. All right, Ms. Alada. What would be the effect of eliminating the sales tax exemption on the economy of Washington in general and Whatcom County in particular?
In border communities, they are penalized because that's part of what makes them competitive and why it was inserted later. That wasn't like the law of the land in Washington always to have the tax exemption. So it was inserted to assist and help those communities be more competitive with those across the border. So, you're looking also at like Vancouver, where they have to compete with Oregon not having a sales tax.
Oh, Vancouver, Washington. I'm thinking Vancouver.
I'm sorry.
You mean
What?
Vancouver, Washington.
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Do you want to respond to that question? I can ask it again.
Yeah, if you don't mind asking
So
it
what
again.
would be the effect of eliminating the sales tax exemption on the economy of Washington and in general Whatcom County in particular?
Okay, so that's a great question. I'm going to quote the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee. That is a committee comprised of equal numbers of House and Senate members and equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. And their own analysis finds no evidence that this tax break causes Oregonians or Alaskans or anyone else to shop in Washington. There's no evidence that the sales tax break creates jobs or stimulates business activity in Washington state. That's from the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. I think we can take their word for it that this is not going to hurt businesses and it's not going to hurt Whatcom County.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mann, why? Nope. In 2014, about half of Washington residents who were eligible to vote did so. Do you think offering residents the ability to contribute to campaigns would encourage larger turnouts?
That's something I hadn't considered yet. I think it would drive turnout. I think it would also drive engagement. Once folks feel like they have more of a say and more power in the system, they're willing to invest the time that it takes to get educated and to make good decisions and to send those tax credits, those democracy credits to the campaigns that they want to support. So I think it probably would increase voter turnout and increase engagement and awareness on the issues.
Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. So in 2014, about half of the Washington residents who were eligible to vote did so. Do you think offering residents the ability to contribute to campaigns would encourage larger turnouts?
It could. It might do that. I do want to address something about turnout and residents and what this does. The democracy credits actually can go to anyone over a certain age. So you don't have to be a registered voter. You don't even actually have to be a citizen. You actually, if you're at Amazon and you're here on an HB1 visa, you actually qualify for these democracy credits, which are, you're going to have people that aren't even able to vote being able to contribute to the campaigns. So I wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with you on this one. There's a lot of. If political system for campaigns is broken, as both of you indicate, is there a better solution than this initiative?
I think there is a better solution than this initiative. It needs to be one that doesn't put funding political campaigns above taking care of the needs of the state, like education and transportation and all those things that taxpayer dollars need to be funding. The thing about the initiative process is it ties the hands of those that are in charge of the budget. When you lock in, hey, this money has to go to this, that means they aren't as free and flexible to figure out how to work within that budget. It will cause more gridlock and more problems when you're talking about the budget and funding things. So this initiative, while the goals are worthy goals and it's important, there's some very important things to tease out in here and things that need to be addressed, this isn't the way to address them. Pitting, losing out on services isn't the way to address cleaning up the campaigns.
Okay, so as we've already made clear, this is not going to impact the state budget, and overall, we're going to have more control over our state government. That is what we need. And in conjunction with 735, we will be delivering an excellent package of reforms. Yes, we both said up here the system is broken, needs to be fixed. I'm not willing to throw out a very good start because it's not perfect. We can vote for this initiative, have a great start on reforming money in politics, and combined with overturning Citizens United someday, then we really will have achieved everything we want to do. But right now, we are constrained by the Supreme Court and federal law. Within those constraints, this initiative is an excellent start.
All right, Mr. Mann.
Yeah.
This measure allows a candidate to use campaign funds to make up for some wages that he or she lost while campaigning. What would be the effect of this provision?
I think you would have folks other than independently wealthy individuals running for office. Not that who's everyone who runs for office, but you need to be able to feed your family. It shouldn't be a choice between, well, I'd like to run for office, but my kids are hungry, so I can't do it. No. If you can supplement your family's income this way, that's totally reasonable. It's already part of the state law, and this doesn't change that.
This doesn't change anything that's already in state law.
It does not? Okay.
No, it
Okay.
doesn't.
Let's start with you on this one. If this initiative fails, what, if any, alternative measure would you support?
I don't know of all the alternatives that are out there. I think this is something that needs to be debated and discussed and looked at. It's a conversation that should be had at the legislature. And if it's a very important thing, then people need to be holding their legislators accountable to this is what we want changes on, and that's what people need to be doing. I don't know of other options that are out there to be presenting. I don't know what's on the table right now, but all the things that this tries to address are things that should be discussed and things that should be debated and talked about and looked at. But doing so, remembering that it shouldn't come at the expense of education and transportation and the priorities that a state needs to fund.
Thank you.
I don't know what other initiatives are out there. I know 18 other states have tried something similar to this, and I think we have to go forward with it. It's not about choosing transparent elections versus funding education. We are closing a loophole that will fund this initiative. And, Ms. Alada mentioned we need to hold our legislators accountable. Well, that's exactly the whole point of this initiative. We are passing this initiative so that we have more control and more say and more influence on our representatives, because right now, they don't seem to listen very well. The connection between policy outcomes and monetary donations is very direct. The disconnect between public opinion and policy outcomes is enormous. I think you used your last one.
I think you did too.
Okay.
In fact, I know you did because I've crossed out all three of your X's.
Thanks.
Okay. This is your final question for both of you. We're going to start with Mr. Mann. Some say that this is a national issue that should be addressed by Congress. Do you agree or disagree with that view, and why?
Sure, I agree with that. I think this is a national issue. I think it's a national crisis. I think we're hearing all of our politicians paying lip service to the rigged system, and the rest of us, a lot of us are sitting here saying, man, I wish I had more choices in this election. Wow, I wish I didn't have to always choose between the lesser of two evils. Wow, I wish I could exert some influence or feel some connection to my elected representatives. This is the start. This is how we get a better foothold in our democracy and hold our representatives accountable. So it's a national issue. No one's addressing at the national level. We're going to take matters in our own hands here in Washington State, and we're going to vote yes on 1464.
Okay, just a final question for you, Ms. Alala. So some say this is a national issue that should be addressed by Congress. Do you agree or disagree with that view, and why?
I think it's an issue that everybody should be addressing. It's where we agree. I mean, if we want to have cleaner politics, if we want, things to get better, I think everybody wants that. Everybody wants to feel like their system is working. But again, this isn't the way to do that. There should be solutions, and this isn't the way to do that. I would caution against, hey, let's just pass it and see what's in it. That kind of strategy and policy making is not a good way to go, because you have unintended consequences and things that can happen that now you're locked into. And instead of cleaning up messes later, why not do it the right way to begin with and figure out what that right way is and the best way to do it is?
All right, thank you. Now, you each get a 1-minute closing statement, and as the pro side, Mr. Mann, you get to go first with your 1-minute closing.
All right. Well, thanks again to everyone for being here, and thanks to the League for hosting. We live in a time when the Supreme Court has ruled that money is speech and corporations are people. We have a major political nominee talking about a rigged system. The data shows a strong correlation between campaign donations and policy outcomes, and the data shows a complete disconnect between public opinion and policy outcomes. And the reason is that money has infiltrated and corroded our political system, and it's time for us to do something about it, to take our power back. Crony capitalism is the idea that government and capitalism only works for those who are already wealthy and have connections. That's where we're headed. Initiative 1464 is an important step towards reforming the political process, reforming money out of politics, making it more transparent and more accountable to us, the people. So please join me in voting yes on 1464.
Okay, Ms. Alala, your closing statement.
Yeah, I would encourage all of you to do your research and read about what is being said about 1464. The Seattle Times, the Tacoma News Tribune, unfortunately, your paper up here isn't endorsing either way on statewide, so you don't have a local voice there. But learn what this is going to do, and while there needs to be changes and there needs to be solutions, we need good solutions, not just, hey, I'll just take it. And we need something that isn't going to cause more harm than the good it's trying to solve. This will take money from the general fund as many times as he keeps saying that it might not. It will. No. So again, the goal is a worthy cause, but this isn't the way to do it. It's something to, like I said, get involved and hold your legislators accountable. And if we do want to talk about direct money having a direct influence, their campaign has millions of dollars from out of state to try and get money out of campaigns. I encourage you to vote no on 1464.
All right, please help me thank both Ken Mann and Yvette Alala for this morning.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. The money from that state.
Yeah, it's a lot of Soros money.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank to each of you, of our speakers, on all the initiatives.
But it is ironic.
And to the City of Bellingham, and to all of you here in the audience and viewing online. We hope you found all three of our forums helpful and that you now feel better prepared to make informed choices on the ballots that you should be receiving any moment. Just so that you know, the ballot should have been mailed, and if you have any questions about the status of your ballot or the status of your registration, you may check that online at myvote.wa.gov. You can actually track where your ballot is. if you have any questions on that. Now, as you can see, the League of Women Voters is committed to making democracy work a challenge. And if you are not yet a member of the League of Women Voters, now is your chance. Pick up one of these on the way out. Thank you all very much for coming, and have a lovely afternoon.